All right, so the good news on Domain 5, welcome everybody, is that we probably covered most of this, but it's in operations now. So a lot of times when we're talking about, say, business continuity, incident response, it's like, oh, what would we do? What would we do if this happens? In Domain 5, it's like, that just happened. so, so it's a lot of overlap. So if you go, wait a minute, didn't we talk about that? Yeah, that's the good news. There are going to be some things that we didn't see, and so let's, without further ado, over that. And in fact, as I was reviewing the slides, I was like, really, Arpita has more experience on this than I do. So, Arpita, we're going to need some. It's picture day. Oh, for your children, or you mean us?
For us, for us.
Oh, I love
That's
it.
how
Oh, I
that's how I
love
got the
it.
idea.
That was so
Like,
funny, Larry. Children picture.
yeah, so part
Well,
of the
she's got young
said,
children still.
I
yeah,
know. But Arpita said today she wants most of us to be on camera. So I
Oh, I
no
love it.
picture.
I love it.
yeah,
Oh,
I wanted
I
to
hope
take
so.
a quick screen capture, and I did get the idea from my daughter because she has pictured it today at school, and I was like, well, I could do that here. So
You want to do it
Guys,
now,
yeah, let's
Arpita?
do that now. Come on, let me pause the
yeah, let's do
recording
that.
Yeah.
so people don't have to worry about that being recorded. All right, thank you everybody for that picture. That's fantastic. Hopefully we'll get our last person there. All right, so again, this is a oh, this is the wrong slideshow. Sorry. This is a why is it open twice? Are you seeing this? Oh, there we
One
go.
might be your screen
Okay,
cap.
now we got it. All right, so this is mostly a rehash. The stuff we covered on. I'm hearing an echo there. Let me mute everybody, just in case you're accidentally on there. The things we already covered on days 1 through 4, we were kind of planning on. Now we're doing it. It's like, so before we were thinking of getting a restaurant. Now we got a restaurant. We got to maintain this restaurant. Whatever you got to, you once you buy the car, there's regular maintenance. You got to regularly drive it, but I'm already behind a little bit on my oil change. Anybody else do that? Push back some of their patches because it just wasn't convenient. So let's go over here. So we want to understand data security. We understood data security. We talked about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We talked about business requirements and legal regulatory requirements. System hardening is when I make sure that system is whatever fully patched. If I don't need a certain server, I turn that off. When you first build a lot of servers, the default is to contain a lot of different features. If you're not using them, turn them off. Everything from hardware things like I disabled whatever these ports I don't use to I turned off whatever this. I remember when you would get an IIS server, it always came with an FTP server and Gopher in the earlier days. Turn that off. Turn that off. Understand best security policy. I mean, best practice security policies. It's all refresher. Awareness and training. All refresher. So again, now we're in operations. We have to daily do it. But sometimes this is and Parvati, you made a comment, and I said it's just like my wife that the operations staff are I liken them to the dishwashers, even though they know they're supposed to clean and wash every dish. This isn't a job they love. And they're generally not dedicated to the way my wife is in other business processes are. They're generally just trying to get through their day so they can get their paycheck. And it's boring to do backups all day, but it's in their hands. So we need somebody to monitor them. And a lot of times we say security people generally sit in between the customer, like a waiter, and the IT or the custodians, the operations staff. They have data in their custody. Yep, it's on your SQL server. It's in your custody, or it went through your firewall. It was in your custody at that time. These are key words on any exam. Operators have data in their custody. They are data custodians. The users were the data owners. Security is in the middle. We don't have hands-on rights in many cases unless I'm the control owner. The control owner is in operations. But the architect, the waiter who went up and figured out, hey, I told you were supposed to roll this patch out next week, or the user said roll out the patch. We get to watch them, make sure they did it right. So security often provides oversight for operations. In fact, I got into this. My wife, she's security. She mentioned how all these people, in some cases, report to her in a dotted line, in that it was uh, no change could be made without their authority. And then after the change, they went in and audited the work. She goes in, her group audits their work. That's the security operations center, and it's all a contractor. They outsource it. Anytime you go to cloud, you probably are outsourcing most of your operations. That's the purpose. You're transferring the risk of having dishwashers that don't care about it and let AWS handle it. So you are transferring the custody in often cases of your data. Right? The Security Operations Center has to deal with monitoring the firewalls and the IDSs. And sometimes when you have like a penetration test, that's what you're actually testing. The technology worked. It sent an alert, and your operations staff didn't read it or overreacted to it. That's what her other problem is. They overreact. They either under or overreact. She's always worried. Here's a classic case of how a lot of malware comes in. Hopefully this will reinforce some of your understanding of networking too. So very simple network here. That's the cloud, right? So this is the outside, and some outsider does something, some malicious code. All right, so now we've got our internal people. Then I've got a perimeter, whatever router firewall. We'll make it very simple. And then I have my inside stuff, and I'm not even going to draw a DMZ. I've got whatever I'll put a switch in here with my servers, yada yada yada, and then I've got the workstation of the guy who clicked on the phishing link. This guy saw some stupid thing that came from wherever. He clicked on it. I'll draw this in a different color. And his workstation was vulnerable to this problem. He clicked on it. The firewalls thing said, "Oh, you're asking for it?" Because I wouldn't let anybody just come in. That's what stateful inspection does. No, 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 this is closed, but if somebody on the inside asks for it, so he goes out. He goes out to the malware, it pulls it down. The firewall was expecting it. It's an encrypted thing. It goes back into the user's workstation, but before the operating system could get to it, the TPM chip, Trusted Platform Module, that's a hardware a solution, right? Chip used by uh, uh, their endpoint detection and response team system. In her case, it's CrowdStrike. Sees that it actually does what's called a detonation chamber. A lot of malware is encrypted. So it creates this little virtual machine, a little VM, and it downloads this encrypted file to see what it does and runs it in a sandbox and says, this is bad, and shuts it down. Nothing went wrong with the workstation. The SOC operator saw it come through and starts going crazy. I saw that this workstation pulled down malware from a known bad site, and people start going crazy. And my wife's like, will you stop acting so crazy? Now you got my boss freaking out. It was stopped by CrowdStrike. Nothing went wrong. A lot of times people underreact. They miss it when it happened. 204 days before they detected a breach. That was the average 2 years ago, right? In 2023 or whatever. But sometimes we overreact too. And I always say it at control. If somebody's driving the car for you, you transferred the risk to an operator, you hired an Uber. You don't want them jamming on the brakes or turning real hard, right? Making you spill your coffee and then act like he just saved you. You're lucky I was here. No, dude. I would rather somebody was paying attention and didn't over or underreact, All right. So again, it could be in-house, managed, and hybrid. And a lot of places are hybrid today. My wife does a lot of the overall thing, but the hands-on is all outsourced. We know what incident management is. When you see incident, you know that there is a man-made intentional issue, whether it's internal or external, right? The insider threat. But we know that it starts with being prepared. Then we detect, analyze, always think before you act. If there's one key takeaway that I hope everybody remembers to pass their exam and to do your job right, always think before you act. We know the rules, and we know that the most important thing is to make sure it doesn't happen again after we're done. So the lessons learned is to get better, and that's the difference between recovery and correction. When you correct, a corrective control addresses the root cause. Lessons learned. Threat intelligence, you download whatever your antivirus software with a signature file. Well, guess what? There's new signatures come out every day. There's new threats all the time. So you have to have, and that's what a lot of our SIM and SOAR vendors, our endpoint detection vendors, that are all on that. That's their job, is to look at the latest threats. What's going on? So one of the great things about these SOAR systems, I keep pushing them because I believe in them eventually. We're not fully there yet, and some people do it with their XDR, whatever, is that a lot of times your IDS is based on the behavior of your network. So we have two ways to detect that something's wrong. One is a signature based, but signatures don't work for new attacks. So we look for unusual behavior, the anomaly. It was heuristically patterned not the way it should have been. Whatever. We look for weird things. That's not right. But that could be a glitch. That could be you got a new service. You didn't know. He's a new employee. I never saw anybody at 6'6" in our building before. He looks like an attacker. He's a new guy. He just happens to be 6'6". So we we have to watch out for these false positives and stuff, and false negatives. You didn't notice it, but the threat intelligence you get from your vendor is looking at the world. No, you're not the only one seeing that this morning. It started 11:15. All pharmaceuticals are getting hit with it. So that's a lot more thorough, right?
Larry, I want to ask the group, like, which one do you think is worse, a false negative or a false positive? I want to ask if somebody has any thoughts on that.
I think a false positive. I mean, a false negative is the worst to me.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I would rather be told you have cancer. Oh, wait, no, you don't. Versus, no, you're fine. He just died of cancer.
That's yeah. So please remember that actually it's important to understand, what a false negative. And I've seen a lot of course materials get that wrong. Larry, I had read a book which had completely changed the meaning of a false negative and a false positive. So I had written to the author and said that, this is not correct, and I never heard back. So it can be confusing, but yes, false negatives are worse because you don't want to miss a true event, because that could cause a lot of damage.
I could also argue that in some environments, so I would say that's a general rule, but there could be some environments where like we had so many false positives, just we couldn't even do business anymore.
Yeah, it's noise to the point that it distracts and consumes so many resources, and you kind of, it takes away from your job. But so I agree with you there. But from a risk perspective for a single event, I guess.
I was also now just thinking of martial arts. It's the false positive that a serious fighter looks for. I try to get you to think I'm coming this way. We throw a fake. We got head fakes, we got shoulder fakes, hip fakes. I try to get you to think that. But it's probably the false negative. No, it's not. He's not coming. He's just a fake. Boom. Oh, that wasn't a fake. That probably does hurt more. All right. That's a good point. Thank you, Arpita. Vulnerability management. Again, every day we looked at the national vulnerability database, but again, it's the copy of the MITRE database, which is some easier search tools for me. But we know that they're discovered every day. Every day, there's dozens of new vulnerabilities discovered in these things, and somebody at your organization has to read these things. My wife gets push notifications if it applies to their environment, and it's like, okay, does this apply? Do we have that? Yes, we do. What should we do? When to start preparing your remediation. And most attacks, remember, if Microsoft, let's say, has a vulnerability that they didn't know about and an attacker figured out, I don't know what to do. If everyone, someone discovers that the responsible thing is you're a good guy, you don't work for them, you're a threat hunter, you're a bounty hunter, whatever, and you find the vulnerability and you tell them, and they're working on it, but it gets out somehow, and then the attacker starts building malware to attack that vulnerability before a patch. This is a very sensitive time. It's called a 0-day vulnerability. There's no patch. But most attacks don't take advantage of that. Most of the time, your attacks are well after the day, but you didn't patch yet. Patches break things. You can't just roll out a patch and go, just patch it. And you can find out, oh, no, now the traders can't trade today. Uh-oh. The life support system didn't reboot, and neither did Bob. So you have to be careful, but it's hard. So vulnerability management is generally keeping up with the known vulnerabilities, seeing where it applies to you, and as quickly as reasonably possible, patching these systems and maintaining your configuration baselines. All right, security information event management. This is like the big console that the security guard can sit at with all the cameras all over the place, So it takes input from all over, all your IDSs, all your firewalls, workstations, correlates them into a single console, and can make better correlation that if this happened here and that's going on there, I'm willing to bet what we're really seeing is a bigger picture here. So much better understanding of what's happening. But they are detective only. They will not stop anything. That's the difference between SIM and SOAR. SOAR, a much newer technology, security orchestration and automated response, will actually start taking actions, but without human oversight. When a human makes a mistake, they at least make human mistakes. I like to say, when a waiter misunderstands me, they will bring me the wrong food, but it's still food. If Alexa misunderstands me, she'll say the damnedest things, because they're not human. Oh, did you say steak medium rare? I thought you said release toxic fumes into the ocean. From an MD5 hash perspective, it's like 1 bit, So when they fail, it's bad. And that's why their automated responses right now, these playbooks, have yet to be fully rolled out for most people. But they're really cool. I think they're very promising. All right, so we know you got to continuously monitor. It's just like when you're driving a car. No, I already put in. I already know where I'm going. I just got to look up my GPS map. GPS doesn't show you if a deer jumps in front of you, right? And it doesn't. Your front windshield is where you're going. You're paying attention where you're going. Did you notice that something was coming up behind you? Or on the side. So when you drive your car, you don't take your eyes off the road, but periodically, you're not even just looking at it. You have to look at the periodically the temperature gauge, the gas gauge, So you're constantly looking at these things, constantly, glancing over. That's not the same as auditing, right? Auditing is periodic. We talked about asset management. You got to identify your assets, know what you have. That's a good way to notice it's rogue infrastructure. Wait, since when did we buy that? I was at a military base, and it's Larry couldn't sleep. It had a little jet lag in Japan, and I was stayed on base at Camp Courtney in Okinawa, and I slept there. There were in a thing, and I couldn't sleep. And one of the guys earlier too bought me alcohol, but it was back when I drank something called awamori, very strong. I get really frustrated at night when the internet's really slow. So I sniffed their network just to find out why it was so slow. I don't want to go into the details too much, but I identified a lot of things that were not supposed to be there. And I could tell by the MAC address. Remember I told you that the organizationally unique identifier tells you what device it is? In fact, let me bring that up again. So right now, this just says there's a MAC address here, right? I see the MAC address, but I have a feature that I can say preferences, and there's a Wireshark thing that for name resolution, could you resolve the MAC addresses? Tell me who belongs to that. And it's just a file. It just makes the display bigger. But now it'll say, oh, that's a Google. Because, let me get my drawing tool back here. Sorry. Because the address of B0, that's byte 1, 2A, byte 2, byte 3, belongs to Google. That's their organizationally unique identifier. Remember I told you that besides the ISO and NIST and the IETF, the other great place to go for these lower level standards, because this is where you electrically figure out, is that 5 volts for me? From the Institute of Electricians and Electrical Engineers. This is actually their thing. This is the IEEE's naming convention. So I was able to see that they had a bunch of rogue printers in there that were the wrong. And anyway, it was a long story, but the next day when I went in, I made a chart when I realized, dude, you found something bad here. And I went to the, it was a CISM class. So I had a colonel, the highest ranking IT guy in Okinawa in the class, and a bunch of lieutenant colonels. And I said, Colonel Chevy, if I overstepped my bounds last night, I apologize. But I blame everything on Lieutenant Colonel Phillips. And he looked up, I said, you bought me the Awamori. I got to show you what's on your network. Did you know this? And they were like, what the hell? And one of my mom's favorite lines is, you like, the things you thought you knew turned out to be wrong. She would always warn you, that's what they want you to think, Larry. So I'd always tell you, don't believe that. That's what they want you to think. When I threw the fake, I wanted you to think that. That's how attacks work, right? I wanted you to think I came from your bank. That's why you clicked on the link. Otherwise, you wouldn't have clicked on evil backdoor. So when I said, I don't know, maybe I'm jumping to conclude, maybe this is just a glitch. Somebody bought some equipment we didn't know about. And one guy goes, that's what they want us to think. I'd already got them. I train everybody on day one. Remember my mom, that's what they want you to think. All right, so let's go back to, oops.
Larry,
Yes, sir.
sorry,
Don't be
I just
sorry.
wanted to say I've got to leave. So,
Well, then
I'll
you're
keep-
okay to be sorry. I'm sorry that you would have to leave then. That's different.
I'll keep in touch, and thanks for Arpita and you for inviting
Thank
me.
you, Louis. It was so good to have you and have you interact and engage. So we hope to see you soon.
Always,
Thank
always.
you.
Oh, you are. Let me know what you think of those things. I hope you're doing in your review there. I can really appreciate it.
Yes, I will.
All
So
right,
bye to everyone. Have a good weekend.
you too.
Thank you. Thanks, Louis.
So you better know what you have, because one of the worst attacks is the rogue access point, is that rogue device. And they don't always look like access points. They have them embedded in hardware that looks like whatever, a power supply, a power strip. That's a real thing. So you don't know. Change management we mostly covered. Again, there's the issue of once you get it running, it was fine, but there's change is the only thing you can count on. You have to change. There's changes in threats, but we need some level of process to ensure that it's orderly, that maybe I got to change something for the entire enterprise. We were always told at IBM, you start with the most friendly groups. If you got to like update client software on every workstation at a place, start with the IT department because they're going to appreciate oh, wait, no, it turns out you got to do this. Yeah, I've been there, You wait till the last race. All right, ready? Well, they're going to do the lawyers next. All right, that's the last group. And sometimes it looked right in the lab, but it just didn't work right. So you'd like to go back to the old way. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes once you cut that wire, I'm not going to knock out a building, a wall of a building and then find out that was load-bearing wall. The ceiling's crashing. You're not going to put the wall back. You put something up there to hold it up. I've been there. Car jack and a 2x4. Anyway, so backing out the change is when I can go back to the previous state. Whatever service port 3.2 sucked, we got to go back to 3.1 and let's roll it back. But sometimes that doesn't work. So a fallback is some other contingency, whatever that means to you. And if it doesn't work tomorrow, we're going to use our phones, whatever it is. Patch management, we just said it's your number one protection against newly discovered vulnerabilities. I mean, they've done things when antivirus came out at first, people were like, oh, antivirus is the greatest thing. It's the greatest thing. Oh, fix it. And then they tested an unpatched like Windows 95 machine or something versus unpatched and running the top antivirus scans versus a patched one. It was way more secure to have no antivirus in a patched system than antivirus on an unpatched. We talked about people need to know the rules. Awareness is for everybody. If there's a fire, everybody needs to know how to get out of the building, right? Okay. If there's some new malware that a phishing campaign, you might need to make everybody aware of this. Training is just for administrators. It's very detailed. So if you want to mitigate the risk of your whatever having a problem with an Exchange server, have the admin trained on Exchange. Great way to reduce the risk of driving a car. Learn to drive. Oops. That wasn't supposed to happen. Why did that happen? That's pretty funny. View. I hit something. There we go. So again, testing and hopefully rollback if it works. Security awareness, emerging trends. SOAR. That's what I keep I really think it's the key to AI-based malware. People are using AI to create malware. Well, I'm going to use AI to fight it. And I'm personally am very optimistic that I don't want to go too far down my little thing, but I mentioned earlier in day one that we for the first generation in history, have more people suffering obesity than starvation. 20 years ago, that was not true. All my life. So I personally think that most of our problems are really people still thinking it's me versus you. Look, either I'm going to get the water or you're going to get the water. There's not enough to go around and you got to compete. And now it's going to be more like, we've got plenty enough to go around. We got to get along. I think that, and I'm very optimistic we'll figure it out. It's a little rough right now. That's what we're here for. That's our job. Understanding security operation activities, again, all the stuff we really mostly covered. So I'm going to go quick until we see something. But again, this is in action. That's the big separation. We're doing it. Security monitoring, the use of our SIM tools, threat detection. And we mentioned that signature-based is when I have seen that attack. These are very accurate. Oh, I've seen that attack. Sin and fin set in the same TCP header. I know exactly what that is. It's Portscape. But new attacks don't get picked up. So behavior-based will say, I have never seen anybody do that before. I'll bet that's an attack. So again, this is more vulnerable to a false negative, which we agreed is probably on average worse, right? Than it's fine, and it turns out to be attack versus the vulnerable to false positive. Let me move that a little over. Oh, it's not attack, but it can be noisy. And today, let's face it, everybody knows that there's two ways. Why don't we do both? And what do you think runs first? Try the signature base. If I got a signature, why even bother? So keep this in mind. A little advanced for this class, but again, I want you to defend yourself. Throw a fake. My mom would say that's what they want you to think. Don't come up clean. If you create malware, the real trick is to know that all these signature-based, all IDSs rank the attack. So it could be 1 very severe, and 10 not so bad. What made up a 10? Rather than write an attack that no one knows, insert a signature that looks like a low-risk attack. And then it never goes to the behavior base. Signature goes, oh, don't worry about it. I got it. It's nothing. So a great way that people do what's called IDS evasion is not to try to come up clean, but to look like an older low-risk attack. Misclassify. You'll misclassify the attack. Come on, you gotta love it. It's what they want you to think. See? Forensics. You have to, it comes from the Greek. It means to be in a forum. It means today, it means like to debate. Forensics. And what helps you win a debate is if you have something that makes it very obvious. I've got a photograph of the dude. It's quite evident. And that's what evidence is. So you have to understand when you gather evidence, when there's a case before trial, there's the evidence discovery phase. At trial, you're presenting. So we're probably going to be doing a lot of electronic, and that's the purpose of e-discovery. And in e-discovery, in any evidence life cycle, you first get the evidence. A lot of ISC2 stuff says collect. The police I work with say it's called acquire or collect. In fact, you'll hear people say interchangeably, it's like, hey, I got one guy does it all the time. He travels the country and he'll say to me, hey, I'm doing a collection in Philly. You got time to go to, yeah, I got to do an acquisition. I'll just use the terms in a relation, collection or acquisition. Then they identify, this is the ISC2 term usually, but that people say, no, you authenticate. Now that's really is his phone or whatever. And then they analyze, and that's called the triple A's of evidence, the hardest part. Now there's two different people doing this. That my guy is very clean cut and he's good with people. He does the collection and the acquisition, and then he maintains chain of custody. And then if he has like a hard drive, he knows how to make an image blessed copy with his digital imaging tool that will make a complete bit by bit, sector by sector copy of that disk, deleted files, whatever. Puts the original away in a locked storage container. He gives the image to the analyst. These are guys who spill pizza all over them. They're not good with people, but they're very not. And they go over and try to figure out what it proves. What is this useful? Then you have to store it. This is all part of the first guy, the collector, also known as the handler. The handler is going to preserve it in a locked cabinet or whatever with proper environmental controls and transport it and then maybe present it in court. And depending on the type of evidence it is and the outcome of the case, it might be returned. You need to maintain a documented chain of custody. And again, that's the handler's job to ensure that it was not tampered with anywhere along the way. A broken chain of custody would have an evidence item be deemed incompetent. Evidence must be material. Evidence requirements. 1, material. It must matter. Material. 2, it must be competent. You did it, you collected it properly. Competent. I don't know how to spell. And then 3, it must be relevant. But doesn't that sound like a lot like material? Relevancy rules are at trial. Material rules are in discovery. So this is, can I bring it to court? Okay. This is at trial. Your Honor, I say that's irrelevant. And of course, we have to watch our legal and regulatory requirements always. Malware analysis, like any attack, I have to look for whether signatures and most of those are gone. Malware today is done. Most malware today will encrypt their malware. Right? Local malware vendors. So you have to really decrypt it to see what it's doing. And I mentioned that stuff, endpoint security things like CrowdStrike or whatever, do just that. They'll actually sandbox it, and then NIST calls it detonate it in a detonation chamber in the sandbox. That's the detonation chamber, and see what it does. And they almost always try to phone home. You know, that's what the clear thing. It's like, all right, he's trying to phone. All right, we know what that is. And that's part of reverse engineering. Reverse engine, when people write code, I don't want to get again too deep, Peter, but when people write a program, there's two ways for the machine to eventually get binary information because they're just speaking ones and zeros, and you're writing get this, go there, put that. Either the code is compiled, anything written in C, all of that English language gets converted to binary or machine code, and or I'm sorry, or something like Python or whatever, a lot of modern things, they're scripted. As opposed to compiled language, a scripted language reads the first line. What does that say? Get this and go here. All right, turn that to machine code. The downside of scripted is it's slower to perform, but our machines are catching up. And it's way easier to troubleshoot, and look at. It's way easier to do a code review. When you're reverse engineering scripted languages, I can look at it. If you take a compiled C program, an exe file, try decompiling that. There are tools. If I wrote it with this tool and I'm the author and I want to decompile, it'll do a good bit of that. If a hacker writes a code and he wants to obfuscate his code, there is no way to decompile that. So what it's called is disassembling. Assembler language is machine code, but they know how it's really in hexadecimal, so I'm not looking at ones. But the real thing is, I know, like Ben was saying today, I got to shut my mouth with it. You had people, how did device driver, what was he asking about? How does bias work? How does it read it? And I was like, I know. It knows because it's always at a certain memory location. Like and the bias for hard drives coming up in the 80s were always at C800. So your operating system, when it loads in and whatever you got 4 gigs or a memory or 8 gigs of memory, those lower parts of the memory get the operating system. They get the device drivers. And so our reverse engineering tools know how to look at that and go, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but this guy's trying to talk to the network card and he's trying to talk to the video driver and blah, 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 and he's trying to implant a backdoor somehow in the GPU, whatever. So that's reverse engineering. They're the great geniuses to me that in this field that I just usually, them and the great AI guys, I shut my mouth and I try to just listen and not interrupt people. All right. So again, we have to regularly scan for vulnerabilities. And Qualsys, the guy, I'm hoping I'm going to get a free copy from him, an educational copy. But the most popular probably is still Nessus or Greenbone. It's a nice freeware version. But there's a whole bunch of them. Nexpose from Rapid7. You have to prioritize vulnerabilities. And my wife schooled me just because the vulnerability scanner gave this a 9 and this a 7 doesn't mean the 9's worse. Consider the context of the machine. The 9's an internal system. The 7 was on a DMZ. It's worse. So there's a lot of other things, and come up with ways to maintain it. We know that. All right, it's all patch management, handling those 0-day vulnerabilities again. If there's no patch for it, you have to consider what are we going to do. Right, now, a lot of times a vendor will tell you, we recommend you do this in the meantime, but that's an issue. 0-day again means the vulnerability is discovered, no patch yet.
Very quick question and sorry, it's a couple of slides back. I spoke on mute and I think I didn't want to interrupt you. For the evidence, you said that when it's relevant, it is for e-discovery. Is that right? Or is it the other way around?
The other way around. The other
Okay.
way around. So material rules are in the discovery phase, whether it's E or not, rather in the discovery phase. So that's when you say the judge approves you to allow it. It's allowed as evidence. You always hear that on TV. It looks like the judge isn't going to allow the guy's phone to be used as evidence, right? That's
Right.
all material rules. But while they're at trial, and that obviously would be easier because if it already met material rules, shouldn't it just be accepted? But no, relevancy is later on when the attorney, the other attorney, still argues beyond. I don't care if the judge allowed it. I still say it doesn't work, and that's arguing relevancy.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. You know, I've had many lawyers in my class that thank me for bringing that up. They actually go, I didn't even realize that, but I learned it from Microsoft's lawyer. I remember I told you I had that a contract with Microsoft in 2003 through 2007, and I had their legal counsel, the head lawyer in my class. Yeah. Well, we got somebody waiting in the
Cool.
room. Yeah. And then I got to use it everywhere. Another anyway. By the way, my lawyers, I've had a good dozen or more, and they always pass the exam. Every one of them knows how. Yeah, but I didn't know the technology, Larry. I knew the words. And my favorite is if you want assurance, you need an action. And only one of those things was a verb, Larry.
Oh, that's amazing.
They always pass. All right. So anyway, we did this vulnerability assessment, patch management, configuration change. We keep beat. Oh, but I do like this one, and I was hoping to see if Arpita, if you had something about configuration drift detection. This was recommended to me with this slide by I think Claude, and I was like, configuration drift. That is a good term. Do you use that term?
Yes, so over time, if you don't maintain in say for example, your base image correctly, you will get configuration drift over time. And this is seen very frequently when you have ad hoc downstream processes that are not correctly integrated at the time of initiation. Ultimately, you'll see configuration drift. Two files are supposed to sync together for on a daily basis, but then some team figures out one process and updates a file downstream and then doesn't write the changes back. So things like that. Over time, you end up seeing this if appropriate processes are not followed and appropriate process owners are not notified. So whoever is or whichever system is maintaining that baseline configuration does not remain what they call like the authoritative source of record. When that
Ah,
happens, then you'll see drift.
what? That's great. There's a couple of things in here that when I was going over, I said, Arpit is probably better for this. So stay. Do you have to go anywhere right today?
No,
Oh,
no.
good, 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 good. Because especially in the next 5-3, I was like, this is most of 5-3. I think it was you were better at. All right, so regular, we have to do. Does this person still really need these rights? You know, one thing that you used it as you said the term earlier. You said authorization creep, but it's also known as deprovisioning. So when somebody joins a role, they have to be provided with the resources that that role requires. If they're no longer in that role or leave the company, they need to have those provisions taken away. And I like to point out that when Bob can't whatever see the file that he needs, he will definitely call the help desk. When Bob can still see the file he doesn't need, he's not likely to call the help desk. And you know who never calls the help desk? When it's not a user, when it's an API. My wife, by the way, we were talking about API gateways, and one of the things that I met the guy that did their API. Oh, shoot, now I forget what it's called. I wanted to bring up the tool, but it monitors all of the gateways. It's an API. Ah, forget what it's called now, but it monitors all these API gateways. And she said, we started out with because they charge by license. That's how this all got. But they started out last year with 400 APIs that they had to monitor. This year, it was 200. This year, it's 4,000. And she goes, "There's no way I'm paying 20 times as much to the vendor." But they has to get more licenses for these things. But that's what it's doing. It's not just looking at users; it's looking at entities or APIs. Automation, we bring this up, but again, AI is going to be doing more. And again, my wife, as smart as she is, had a mistake. AI, like we're using right here, these large language models are great for user interfaces sometimes. Microsoft Copilot. But the AI that's being used in a lot of intrusion detection is machine learning. That's not the same as pre-trained transformers that were pre-trained on words and then they try to transform in sentences. Does this make sense? No, this is learning on the fly. I never saw that before. Let's make a note of that. So machine learning is much more appropriate in intrusion detection and security. Let me go back, but balancing automation with human expertise, we still have to have the human at the final say. All right, can I serve that food? And the robot goes, yeah, it looks good to me. And like, nah, there's glass chips in it. They don't like glass? Oh, all right. All right, so the basic security operations procedures, and you have to develop them. And this is also stuff that I think you can help as the importance of working with the stakeholders as you develop the procedures. So some neat stuff here that I'm hoping Arpita can send on. So the steps in procedural development: assessing, drafting, reviewing, approval, implementation. I read that sentence and I go, this looks like Arpita's. I didn't give you the slide. I know I modified it. I gave you the slide, but it looks a little different. Do you mind addressing some of this issue here?
No, not at all. So security procedures, I guess in alignment with any procedure development, have to go through a number of techniques to ensure that every step in the process is captured accurately. So this might be using strategies like observing, walking through, shadowing, and doing sessions that we call day in the life of sessions, where the person that's documenting and drafting the procedure actually performs exactly step by step under supervision what they are documenting. And that is the best way to ensure that all the common errors and the possible missteps are captured accurately. Flowcharts are another way to document procedures. Sequential documentation of steps are also very common. Of course, as Larry mentions in the slide, stakeholder involvement and approval is absolutely essential. You need to make sure before you start doing documentation that you are talking to the right people. You can't develop a procedure with a third level manager who doesn't know what the nitty gritties are of the process that they're documenting. So the right level of people at different stages need to be involved. And it's very important to make sure that the procedures are reviewed on a regular basis and updated, because everybody, will do a one-time procedure draft that quickly goes out of date. And then as processes change and systems change, nobody goes back and updates the procedure. So especially when we used to run projects, we would make sure that updating the procedure was the last step in anything that was done. So it was like a mandatory time to review what change was going into production, for example, and what procedures need to be updated. And if there was no change, it was just like a back-end fix, for example, we would get approval from the product owner and the stakeholders that everything was still up to date with what was currently documented.
That's fantastic. And there's a very simple question that you just reminded me of that I've never addressed on almost every exam about procedures. So when you were talking about shadowing the person as well as making that person who wrote the procedures actually walk through it and make it work, there is a funny question that shows up on procedures. It's worded, with the type of thing they're trying to capture this content. Which of the following is the most important about procedures? That they are well documented, that users are trained on them, that they are available on alternate media, that they work. That they work. You could be trained in
Or-
available procedures that don't work. You're like, oh, it was easy to understand. That was usually one that shows up. They're easy. They're written in a clear language, easy to understand. Easy to follow. Because we do, those are important things. It is important that people are trained on the procedure. That it is easy to understand. That it is available somewhere on the drive besides the one that burnt down. But they better work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, I knew you could do it. Don't go away. Oh, actually, we need a break, I think. Come on, let me see what's on the next one. So this is let's get through the procedures. And so we know you're going to do what she just said there, and version controls, and make sure you're following the current procedure, because you also said that they go out of date, and that's the last thing you want to do, is make sure that's done. And implementing, training them. I talked about phasing rollouts. Do the most friendly groups first. Handling resistance. What do you have there? I'm just curious. What type of resistance did you run into, and how did you handle that?
For procedure documentation?
Well, handling resistance to any implementation. I'm thinking of something that actually Parvati said, but like for training, we give them like 48 hours and then we require it. And like, oh, I didn't know.
I think it goes even much earlier than that in the life cycle. Like if you think about it from an SDLC perspective, I think the biggest piece of resistance comes from the developers and the testers, in that they don't want to do regression testing because they are so confident, oh, I did not touch this piece, I don't want to test it. But yeah, sure enough, they did, and they broke something. So if you do not have automated test suites and automated testing capabilities, developers and testers have to spend a lot of time doing regression testing, which they absolutely don't like to, because they think it's a waste of time because they know what they did. But it's always useful. Documenting their changes is also another area where they're very reluctant to comment the code, to document their specifications. And I would, when I was doing this, I would just put that in their sprints, or whenever we were doing agile development. It would be activities that they could earn credit for, so they would do it. But if it is something that you ask them to do after the fact, they really don't like doing it. And then I think the other part that I used to get a lot of resistance is monitoring and doing post-production validation, making sure that, again, nothing broke, everything was good. They usually just implement the change and,
Go
be
away.
done. Yeah, exactly. We're done. Everything's up and running. But yeah, something, caused a performance delay, or something didn't work as expected. The reports are not downloading. All that would come up, after a few weeks. So again, like there are pros and cons in terms of the tools and the team members and how experienced they are. So this was not something that I can say happen everywhere and
Yeah,
all,
but it's still
but
probably fairly
very
common.
common.
You know
Yeah.
what you reminded me of? I haven't done operations in 20 years, but we used to joke about the guy who thought he was like a great miracle worker. He stayed in all Sunday night making this change, then didn't show up Monday morning when it didn't work right. Dude, nobody in sales can print. And he's like, where's he? He thought because he stayed up last night, he wasn't coming in. Yeah, it was really tough. The other thing that you said, though, that I know there's a test objective on regression testing. You said it's always important. There's one time when it's not, and you have to find it on the test. When it's a new application, there's no regression is to test it compared to the old one. And there are definitely a question might show up as which of the following would regression testing not work? And you're like, it's a new app. There's nothing to go against. All right, standard operating procedures. We have to create them so people know how to follow them. And again, procedures are not guidelines. What I didn't suggest you follow this. If you didn't follow standard operating procedures, you're going to be held accountable and maybe you lose your job. So, like the pilot's checklist. That's what I got to do Wireshark training at Riverbed, and I worked for a pilot. Hansun Bay. He's still one of the greatest Wireshark guys ever. Also a city guy, by the way. It was, and he said, Larry, he gave me SOPs for how to load Wireshark basically, and he'd say, it's just like a flight pilot there. A pilot, you always go here. Thank you, Carl. Oh, what did I miss? Oh, Carl, you're taking off? Did I miss it already? Well, we would love to having you there. Sorry about that. Oh, and I said we were going to take a break. Let's go 3 more minutes because I don't like to break on this 27 thing. So we're going to review again. We've already talked about this. Sorry, I have so many slides on the same thing. Sensitive information. Let's stop here. Pause my recording. So we discussed, sensitive. By the way, I just want to make sure everybody does remember too on an exam that sometimes it's not easy, like just getting the words right. Ezekiel, you mentioned just language alone, if English isn't your native language. When you see sensitive, always remember this is associated with confidentiality, especially that includes privacy. Right? But when you see critical, this is associated with availability. Subtle little things make you understand why C was better than D. It's little things like that. Integrity is always integrity for some reason. So when we're dealing with sensitive information, we typically think of course, we classify. We know that, and we have to select the appropriate controls per classification. Remember, that's the whole goal of classification, to map that classification to the appropriate controls. I don't protect top secret engineering the same way I protect whatever unclassified, but I might not even protect it the same way as I protect top secret HR. That's not a classification, that's a compartment, right? So another thing I want to refresh us on is NIST talks about categorizing data in the risk management framework. When you categorize data, you're not just selecting a classification. Classifications are hierarchical. High, whatever, that's a classification. Medium, low. But having different compartments, which could be for many different reasons. In a private company, you might do a compartment for different roles. Sure, I can compartmentalize compartments. Oh, boy, Larry, man, I'm never going to get this right. There we go. Compartments, sorry. Compartments can be created for roles, but they are often, especially in the DoD, you'll hear stories about agents, say, working on this FBI case, and they somehow got access to a different case, and that agent wasn't supposed to see that. So the term classification is important, setting those hierarchies. But more and more, you're going to see laws reflecting what NIST wants us to use the term category. Come on. Larry, we lose more time because of your typos. Categories. You categorize your data and your systems. Categorize is to both. That assumes that you didn't just classify. Oh, no, you compartmented too. Thank you. That's categorized. Good stuff. But classifications are used all the time. If you're going to take an exam, 80% of the time, they're going to use the word classification. And we were talking earlier about disposal, about the approved ways of degaussing and the thing. And basically, 5222M is the document that everybody's based on. No, you can't degauss and reuse. I don't mean to step on Ben there, but that's not true. There are other two ways. There's clear is one overwrite. If it's in the same category, your one overwrite's fine. If you're going to reuse it in a different category, you're supposed to purge. If it's TS, if it was secret and below, you don't need to know, but purge was multiple overwrites. Either way, they may call that zeroizing. When you zeroize, you're overwriting the data with a pattern of really of zeros and ones, but they call it the zeroize, whether cleared or purged. But today, the overall big takeaway is that most people don't have with the whole cloud world, it's a funny world. It's really somebody else's computer, but we just decide to specialize in what we do and let somebody else, and we collaborate with a big group. And if our collaborators have our data in their custody, I can't tell them to degauss the drive. I can't call up AWS and say, yeah, who's in charge of the disk drives here? That's not going to happen. So today, the only reasonable method of destroying your data, now that we have all this great encryption stuff, encrypt your data. And then that's with a symmetric key, with the AES, right? And then I would create a key pair for AWS. AWS calls this a customer master key, the CMK. And I can then allow them access to the CMK is allowed. It's like, all right, Bob, you're allowed to see the key to the safe. So the key to the safe is the AES key. AWS gets a key to where all the keys are. I take the key to the safe and I put it in another safe and I go, here, you can have the key to the key safe. And that's the CMK. If you delete the CMK, AWS can't get it anymore. I don't delete the symmetric key that created the data. That's like taking all my data that was all my stuff in the safe and having to get a new safe. Rather than doing that, I just say, no, you're not allowed. Bob, give me the key to the safe. You don't have it anymore. But actually in computers, we don't have to say, give it back. We just revoke it. We revoke that key. So that's crypto shredding. Crypto shredding is the only reasonable method for data disposal today. When you're doing this, please don't worry about shredding stuff. Unless you're in the military, you will have to degauss and shred hard drives. But if you're work for a healthcare organization, I think crypto shredding's fine. Emergency and exception procedures. There are times when one emergency is just like, hey, this just happened. Now, one of the most important things in emergencies you have to understand is it's a little tough to sometimes make a critical decision and get the boss on the phone and go through proper authority and stuff like that, before it. But after you did it, you better tell them. So when sometimes you have to act in emergency, the guy's life was at stake. I had to, I know we're not supposed to touch employees, but I gave the guy mouth to mouth, in an emergency. I want to, all changes, emergencies or not, have to be certified and accredited. All changes, all significant changes above a baseline. Like I don't test every antivirus signature, but I don't even test every hotfix. Neither does the common criteria, but they'll test service pack. So you could decide what's important, what maybe the law tells you anything over $5,000, whatever that means. All changes must be one, certified, and two, accredited. You Brits, in America, we like to say authorized. Cred, it comes from the Greek. It means to believe. When a boss accredits or authorizes, it means, I believe that's good enough for now. Certified is you're absolutely certain. No, it's 10 megs of RAM. Certified is to be certain. When you certify, you need to technically test this. Technically test. Quantitatively, I don't want to hear it looks good. I want to hear numbers. I was able to push whatever 10 gigs per second. That's what I need. And I don't really want to hear you talk about it. Please write it down. You know, like a certificate. That's why you get third-party certificates. That's what you're here for, to get that certificate to prove that you were tested, technically. It's exactly why you're doing this. Sometimes we transfer certification to a third party, but accredited we can never do. Now, when you accredit, you're not allowed to transfer this risk. You're going to have to take that on yourself. I'll draw this in another color. You have to get approval, whether you call it with a cred or you call it a authorized formal approval. All right. Boss said it was okay. And like if you get approved, hey, can I get a company laptop? Yes. Can I get the micro? The 32 gigs already? Yes, you can get it, Larry. July 1st. Scheduled. Pick up my B. Now, if I got to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, or if I got to down a server that I'm not supposed to do, but there was a fire in the building, that's an emergency. That requires immediate action. I will still have to do this. I will come in over the weekend and perform it later, after I've done it, retroactively. And you can then come back in and retroactively test it and get your document, get the boss to sign off, but you can't retroactively schedule. So in your near future, if you ever have to do an emergency issue, you see that word? The only process you can skip is scheduling. You do not skip certification or accreditation. You just, when you accredit, it's like, we did this Sunday, right? All right. All right. Very important. Now, the exception process is often for technologies. Everything's got to have at least multi-factor authentication there. Everything's going MFA. The closed circuit TV system doesn't support it yet. What are we doing about it? They're supposedly going to release it next quarter. We're also looking at 3 other vendors for a change management. We're going to do a cost benefit analysis. All right, you own that risk. Somebody's going to own that risk and maintain that. But you have to have those documented exceptions. The last thing you want is an auditor to come in there and go, what is this? And someone goes, oh yeah, don't you remember we were doing that? I remember Bob talking about that. You pull out paperwork, you pull out evidence. We talked about the importance of compliance, and I meant to have a list for you. There's a couple things going on in compliance with AI that I'm watching. So let me try and find them real quick here. Let's go. What I say, I always trust Claude the most for doing these things. Start a new chat. In AI regulations and best practices, I know there is a NIST AIRMF, a EU GDPR-like AI regulation, and a newer I'll just say CA one planned or in place now. Please explain a little. Oh, okay, Saksham. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope everything goes good. But it's been wonderful. You were a great student.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
actually,
much.
I have to leave. Yeah, something's came up, so I will be dropping now.
All right. Well, I wish you the best, sir. I wish you the best. God bless. Namaskaram.
Namaskar.
So the NIST regulator is the AI ARMA. This is a voluntary framework developed by the U.S. that aims to help organizations. And this is good guidelines. I remember going through it and it goes, again, this is mostly guidelines. The standards that come, I didn't see them in there, but if you work in this, what people confuse NIST with, and it's part of NIST, but really it's the Federal Information Processing Standards. That's another standards body in the US. But if you work in the US and stuff and it's related to NIST stuff, NIST will give you the guidelines. FIPS tells you, no, you have to do this. You can't use SHA1 or MD5 or whatever like that. All right. So then there's the EU Act, and this came out, and it's very GDPR-like, and I think it's very nice. It's a little ambitious. The rate of AI development versus government regulatory bodies' ability to make changes. The ability for AI to progress versus US Congress. So I think this is well-meaning, but people are saying this is stifling, and I want to see something. So I've been working on AI-related regulators. It's not as comprehensive. There are a few initiatives. No, it's comprehensive. Includes provisions related to AI that might affect children. Okay. There have been discussions about more I've heard, I just want to ask one other thing. The regulation frameworks reflect the growing concerns about ethical use and potential risks. They aim to ensure. Would like me to elaborate? Yeah, I do. Just a little bit more on the California one, and why has it been? I have been to a number of AI conferences this year, and the CA regulation seems to be getting a lot of criticism. I think it's a C, right? I'm sorry. Criticism about it about it being stifling. Is that how you spell that? No, no E. But it being stifling and unreasonable. Unreasonable. Hey, that's pretty low. Oh, this last update was April, and I think it's come to yeah, well, always in a vision, but that's always true. Why do these cops give me a speeding ticket? I can drive safely at 70. You know, it's that kind of thing. This is one of them, though. And this is probably it. Compliance costs often, that's pretty generic. And that's a huge one because China doesn't follow our laws, and there's so many American, and I'm in the common good. I don't want to choose US versus China. I don't want to do that. There's a whole bunch of like people. I was just complaining to my wife, who was actually, even though she's Chinese from Taiwan, so she's kind of joins that bandwagon. And I'm like, we got to stop trying to compete against China. We got to integrate and collaborate. But I don't want to be the guy that's saying peace and somebody else throwing a punch in my face. I got to be ready. All right. Let's go back and finish this up then. So these are it came up because of compliance, and I wanted to. There's these are the new AI regs that people are coming up with. The European, most of the people I know seem to really love it. They think it's there to protect the citizen. So I'm not as detailed into it. I'll let somebody else go further. Well, when we measure procedure effectiveness, we talked about having key performance indicators, and I need, some numbers, and I like to use the thermometer. You tell me that you're maintaining the temperature in that room. I've got a thermometer in that room, and I'll be the one to judge. I'll be looking and seeing how good you're doing there, and that could be whether or not the kids are leaving the front door open or something, or setting the air conditioner too high, and I can look at that. But on the KPI, on the temperature gauge, I have different colored areas. So green is optimal. Everything's going good. Yellow, we're starting to, maybe I'm driving a little too fast. I'll let myself drive, 7 miles over the drive speed limit, but I don't go more than 10. Then I start going, oh, dude, you're going 15 miles over. We're in the red. I'm definitely in the thing. So if my speedometer was my KPI, then the little tack red, in the yellow and red are KRIs, key risk indicators. So in security metrics, our KPIs need to have KRIs associated with them. When is it too hot? And, that's what we're doing. AI is just a weird word to use for automation. It brings in this mystique. People just think all of a sudden it's like ghosts. They're like, oh my gosh, it's so weird. It's like it's artificial. What's your calculator? I read a really funny thing. Most engineers feel the same way. Most AI specialists do. Ray Kurzweil, in his most recent book, said it's a terrible term. But roboticists use the same thing. And he said, when does it become a robot? When it has a face? Because in 1912, I think was when a commercial washing machine, I think, came out. And up until then, it was usually in the United States, the wife, the mother, and people didn't have as many clothes. But when you look at blankets and stuff, somebody had to wash this by hand, and you had more kids because you figured that most of them were going to, it's like 1 in 5 is going to die before they hit 5 years old in those days. So yeah, all these kids, this Irish people that have like 12, and mom's washing 50 hours a week doing laundry. And the washing machine came out. Is that not a robot? And the other one was the elevator. When the elevator came out, all right, now you got an automated way to get up, but you had an elevator operator. And that worked through. So the elevator was like in the late 1900s, but it then up until the 50s, they invented an automated, just press a button. They used to have an operator. His job was to make sure that the thing landed at the floor, didn't have a big stop, wherever the doors were closed. And people were afraid to get on them. They're like, I'm not going to trust this thing. And they would stop. I can remember where elevators would stop in the middle. You got a foot and like, I got to walk up that. And I also remember elevator operators, not too many of them left now. But it took about 10 years. 10 years when it went from people are like, I do not trust that, to, of course, who needs an elevator operator? So automation is really all we're doing. We're automating the boring stuff. Sometimes, whether it's a false positive, a false negative, or just a glitch, this is why I say AI is not here to replace us. It's just going to take away our boring work. We call it the 3 Ds. Let AI and robots take over the dirty, the dull, and the dangerous. Integrating procedures across all of our security functions, getting a uniform, just having uniform terminology so people can come together in a group and be able to speak the same language. That really is the purpose of the NIST risk management framework, to make sure everybody from whatever the Air Force to the U.S. Department of Agriculture don't use their own taxonomies, their own words, but they're using the same terminologies. We talked about all these technologies from, IDSs to sources to SIM systems, nothing really new. Or API gateways, maybe I should have brought up yesterday. But remember, we have more APIs are coming on than people. And so an API gateway's job is to sit there, like you can get it if you have an Azure or AWS, they have gateways that you can look at that will authenticate and make sure that the different APIs you're using for your apps are properly OAuth and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Soar again. I just like the graphics. Maybe I should have done fewer slides. I don't know. Stop me if I'm going. If you go, Larry, can we ask more? Otherwise, this is the cutting edge, though. This is really the hardest part. The hardest part is the behavior analytics and determining what is normal. And it's as we as a society open up and start, ships taught us about people who we didn't even know existed before. We didn't even have a map of the globe. There was no world map. Humans in this hardware, the basic Homo sapien have been around for, we think now, somewhere around 300,000 years. That's the latest, the numbers I know of. And our software has changed. And up until we developed the ship with the sail, with the triangle sail on the front, the Portuguese developed this, we couldn't sail very far. That was like 1600 or 1500s. And then all of a sudden we started sailing around the world and meeting people and figuring, hey, they ain't like us. We got more guns. Let's take what they got. The Spanish was just like took everything. They were just so terrible. They were horrible. Well, we're good Christians. These are godless people. Horrible things that they did. And the Brits said, hey, let's steal from the Spanish and do our own horrible things in like India and stuff. And they didn't, it was really hard, But as we become, the world gets rounder, it wasn't just evil stuff. We started to do some good stuff too. We started collaborating. I mean, we mixed sugar from the Americas with tea from China. Do you like that? Do you like Szechuan Chinese? That was Chinese food mixed with peppers from the Americas. All kinds of stuff. We got, America got to taste Indian. Actually, my lunch, by the way, I make like a little samosa. It's just eggs and kale, and then I put it in a low carb wrap that I spray with olive oil, and then I wrap it up. And since it's not really a samosa, but it kind of looks like one, I call it a saposa. So that's what I made for lunch. It's supposed to be a samosa. But we learned to taste this. So we collaborate, and now we can do great stuff, but it makes our user and entity behavior of what's normal. Where a lot of this shows up on exams, even the CC, cultural considerations when you implement a control. Watch out for that. I always joked around. My mom was upset. My mom was Irish Catholic. My father's Jewish. My last name's Jewish. Everywhere I've worked, everyone always assumed I was Jewish and assigned me to do coverage on Catholic holidays. And the first time it happened, it was on Easter, and my mother was so upset. You have to work on Easter, Larry? But I just felt important because they need me, I didn't mind.
That's funny. Larry, two things I want to point out here. Again, for app security, it's a really good idea to go to the OWASP top 10 for
Yes.
security vulnerabilities. I think you have it in your slides somewhere, but just a reminder that it's important to see that because it's not a list of very complex problems. I think that's the irony of it. These are very easy to fix issues, but they are still on the top 10 because people, don't design with security in mind, and they kind of bolt it on after the fact instead of baking it into the design. And that's what this top 10 tells. Things like SQL injection can be simply avoided by input validation and other things, but it's not done.
Pause right there. How did you say we could do it? We could mitigate it through. Remember, we have a beginner audience. They may not know the phrase off the back of their head. You just said a wonderful term.
Not bolting it on, but making it into.
No, input validation.
Oh, okay. All right.
When somebody inputs something, most of these attacks I can be mitigated with input validation. Just make sure, like if it's a phone number, it should be 10 characters and it should be a number. And it should also fall within a certain range. Not everything is used. There's no 000 numbers. So it's always check the length, validate, input validation, validate length, type, and range.
Good example, Larry. Like another one is a social security number. You know that it has a fixed number of digits and a fixed format in the US. Don't allow alphabetical characters, don't allow special characters, or a number of characters has to be fixed.
And there are
So
blacklisted ones of known dead people.
Hmm.
So if that gets in there, it's like, oh, not an acceptable range.
that's a good point.
Yeah. Oh, but you also said something after that when you were guessing the wrong one. That's also good. What did you say after that? When you were trying to, did you say, Larry, do this? And I was like, oh, that's also good. Oh, shoot. I'm
Don't
sorry.
bake it, don't bolt it on, bake it in.
Bake it in, not bolt on. That's right. We want security integrated into the design, not sprayed on or whatever after. And that usually shows up in life cycle management. So, you got your project
Yeah.
initiation at every point you consider security right in the beginning, even in feasibility. Hey, I got an idea. You think we should do this? And you go, what if this happens? What if somebody was to do that? So security is integrated in every step of the life cycle. Every, yeah.
And it's also it's useful to think of it this way, especially, I know this is a CC course, but some of you are applying for the CISSP, where they talk about test-driven development, where they start with test cases, and that's how they develop code. And the goal is to pass test cases. So they work with the users and write as many test cases as they think, and they develop based on that. So initially everything fails because there is no product. But then as they keep developing the product, they develop based on test cases. So if the user didn't think about the security aspect upfront, then they'll, the application that they build is not a solid one. But then over time, they think about these test cases and develop for that. So that's
Well,
also
before even going to test cases, they need to have right requirements, validate requirements. That's the most important thing.
that's true, of course. But it's difficult to think about everything upfront. So, the test-driven development encourages you to add new requirements, but they develop it in terms of test cases.
I tend to cook in a certain way where I always just go in and try it and screw it up bad. And it always reminds me of I worked as a kid in a place at a factory and I was haunted by this little awareness poster. It said, why is there never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over? It's like, ooh. Why is there never time enough for you guys to do it right the first time, but you find the time to do it over? It's like, okay, I don't want to do that. Cool, cool. Anyway, getting back, thank you. That's awesome. The user and entity, again, these are APIs and increasingly our AI agents, analyzing what's normal is very challenging. But we can often say what's not normal. Like in my environment, clients talk to servers. They don't talk to other clients. That's just unusual behavior, things like that. That is usually a sign of a botnet too, when you see clients talking to clients. I've mentioned endpoint detection and response, and then we also have network detection and response, and many people have just combined it to call it XDR, extended detection and response. But the endpoints are basically the individual machines, not the network device, not the bridges and switches, but the actual computer. And typically these sit below, they're part of the operating system. Like I load Windows and then I load a CrowdStrike or something, or what's a Defender on there. But they also have the ability to talk to the TPM chip without going through the operating system. So sometimes, if you have antivirus software, it's kind of like, think of your computer as a hotel, right? So a hotel building is the hardware. And then if it's whatever Hilton uses it, they have their own operating system. It's a little different than if it was a Quality Inn, right? But whatever they do, all hotels pretty much, they'll have, say, different floors, and each floor will have a different room or whatever. And when you check into your room, you're like an application, and the hotel manager assigned you a room. So all applications are assigned a hotel room. They don't get to talk to the hardware. If they wanted to talk to the disk or the network card, this should have been red, sorry. They have to ask the hotel manager, hey, I need to make a call. And they go through that hotel manager. Hey, I need to do that, and he'll do that. When you load antivirus software, you're hiring a hotel detective. And the hotel detective gets a key that doesn't just open up his room. Most users only get keys that open up their room. Right? That's the memory address space for this application. You are between E000 and EFFF. But if the security or the hotel detective is going to investigate in that room, he needs to ask the operating system to get a special key that will open up all the rooms. If the operating system itself is infected, that's not going to work. But if you have endpoint detection and response, that's already an app that talks directly to the hardware. So I don't care if this thing gets corrupted, CrowdStrike, and the Microsoft Defender, they're going to notice that. So it's a much more secure way of doing things. And they can work with network access controls that just say you're not even allowed on the network. Remember, that's the layer 2 thing that says I'm not letting, and originally that phone number give you a network, MAC address. But today it's, whatever, could be a Wi-Fi card, could be a Ethernet card. I'm not going to let your MAC address talk. These are companies and services and products that will help you who might not be a specialist in looking at all your different cloud providers and making sure that everything's, maybe things aren't coming from Azure into AWS. I can't look at all this stuff. So they can do a lot of this stuff for you. So just look for the term CASB. They give you some visibility into, like, your utilization, I'm a network guy, so I'm always looking at network top talkers and conversations and stuff like that. Maybe the errors and whatever reports. So integrate all of your various cloud providers. Here's something I thought maybe you could also help with, Arpita, better. Brian, I know you have a lot more experience here than I. Don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, sure. No worries, Larry. I don't think I'm as prepared, but again, like to all
That's
of
my fault. Well, I can talk to the
Um,
container in Kubernetes. It's the CI/CD pipelines that I would like to have. I have a little knowledge. I'm not saying I'm stupid. I just know that I'm not as smart as you are on this.
Yeah, so I personally did not work, well, I work very closely with DevSecOps teams, but I don't have any new comments to share other than the fact that it starts with the initiation phase with the right set of stakeholders to ensure that you have a mindset where you are doing continuous releases and continuous integration.
I put you in a spot. You were like totally, but what I was trying to get to was your agile, how this
Yes.
relates to agile.
Yes, it does. So that's the fundamental methodology and the mindset for Agile, is to do potentially shippable releases. First, they used to say that every bit of work that is done should be releasable, but then over time they changed it to potentially releasable because sometimes it wasn't feasible to have a releasable product. But that's what DevSecOps does really well, is they have a number of releases in a single day, and they do release in increments in a way that they have a fully working product at the end of every release, and that's their fundamental underlying nature of these CI/CD pipelines, which is number of releases per day of shippable product and continuous integration.
And yeah, continuous. So it's basically, it's not like we're considering doing a new payroll app. It's the payroll app is running, and we're constantly updating. And I need to continuously, and whether it's a new feature release or it's a patch to a vulnerability, we don't shut down the payroll system or bank or whatever, a life support system. Now, once you write your code and you got it, what cloud does so well is scale up and scale down as you need, and you pay as used. So when I write, I don't write code. When someone writes code, we write maybe a reusable module that somebody could use in various places. So spell checker, for instance, could be used by Word. It could be used by Exchange or whatever. You know, the Microsoft spell checker is shared through other things. But if I came up with a new PowerPoint with a new spell checker, right, and I because I needed to do this other stuff, it might break Excel and Word that weren't ready for the new spell checker. So an operating system, let me draw my picture again of my hotel. Operating systems do three basic things. The OS, which I always wrote in blue there, sorry. The operating system will decide and has to know what users are there. We know created usernames and passwords, sure. It has to know what hardware is available. I can't print to a printer if it's not there. I can have a device driver that lets me do it. But it also needs to know application libraries. So these are like a dynamically loaded library, a DLL. It's not in memory now, but I'm going to load it and then I'll unload it or whatever. And they're shared often. Word and Excel both use it. But if the new version conflicts with some of the other apps that are trying to share that, you broke us all so you could have an extra feature? Docker came up with a cool little thing to take your operating system, keep the same users and hardware. I mean, with a virtual machine, I could keep the same hardware, but I'd have to recreate new users. Like if I spun up a new VM, a new virtual, one of these guys. Like if I said I was having a problem and in this build of Fedora, I'll just build another Fedora. I'll build a new VM, and I'll have to recreate my users, and I'll have to whatever all reset up. I'll have to maintain the patches, give it an IP address. It's a lot of stuff. But instead, Docker lets you keep that, but contain application libraries, so I can have multiple sets of duplicate libraries. That made development so much easier for developers. No more, well, originally you got a new piece of hardware, but then even loading up VMs is a pain in the butt. But now, so that really enabled back to agile, that container technology. But suppose I have this server running and it's able to handle 100 simultaneous users, but then all of a sudden 1,000 more people want to use it. So I have my servers around the world all clouded out there, speak to each other, and Kubernetes will orchestrate these various containers and say, okay, I need to get you more. I need to get more over here. So that's really what enables the cloud. These are the cutting edge things right now. When I say cutting edge, for me, it's cutting edge. It's been out for like 10 years, like 20, all right, whatever. It's still very, very cool though. Are being used in security pipelines to automate security and fits easily into CI/CD pipeline. Thank you. Awesome. Oh, for anybody who shares new information that I didn't know before, I got to warn you, you may hear me do a talk later and act like I've known it for years and not give you credit. I apologize for that. Did you know that tools like Sync and Datadog? Yeah, I've known that. No, thank you very much. All right, cool.
That's fine. Actually, we are using that in our pipelines. Like I'm a principal cloud architect, so we are using it extensively for security purposes.
Oh, wow.
We have inbuilt, we have multiple tools that we have integrated in the CI/CD pipeline. So before we make any release, it scans the code for it. It scans the code like the infrastructure as a IAC code, our developer code, like the programming languages and all the others, whatever we are supported. Plus, it does some additional. It runs actually additional some tools that will give us insights about SQL injection, XSS, like OS 10. And then if it passes all the tests, then only we release it. Otherwise, we need to fix all the issues, and then only we can release it.
So that's the potentially releasable that Arpita was talking about, right?
Yep,
Because they're no, we're not ready to release it. It's not going to
Yes.
work.
And also, it's not just a continuous integration and deployment, and also it helps if in case if we need to roll back the code, if there's anything.
Oh,
they
that's nice
find.
to know. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, these are versioning built in to them. I think, Bhavesh, if I'm not wrong, Bitbucket does that for, it's a tool for that, right?
Yeah. So in Bitbucket, so there is a build file, build YML
Yeah.
file, and there I think we can specify what all tools we want to integrate, like in different steps. So depending on the organization requirements and if they have bought the tool, and if there are some open source tools also that we can use. So based
Right.
on that, so it depends basically on it varies from organization to organization how they want to implement it, what all they want to scan. So, but yeah, it's a great way to include security from the very beginning instead of doing it at the last moment.
Baked in, not sprayed on.
I had you just reminded me of some old days where I used to work in SAP, and CI/CD was not a big thing then, but they had a really fantastic way to roll code into production, and they used transports. I'm not sure if there's anyone who worked on SAP before, but that's basically a very like primitive version of this, where everything was versioned under what they called transports. And it was a sequence, and you had to put the transports on a bus and then move that to production. So your code would move to production in a sequence. But yeah, if somebody messed up the transport sequence, then the code would get messed up and overwritten. So I think they came a long way from there. But SAP was really fantastic at using these type of tools very early on.
Cool. Cool, cool. I'm learning. This is where I'm dumb, really dumb. I came the stack up. I was literally we used to call them cable monkeys. I was doing laying cable.
The
You're
problem
not dumb,
with
Larry.
technology is, though, things change so quickly that if you're not in it, my knowledge is outdated, Larry, in terms of the practical stuff. So yeah, like Bhavesh, what you explained.
My wife was, I
Mm.
told you, it's an hour and a half each way. Actually, it was 2 hours getting there because of traffic. And a good deal of that conversation was reminding me that how out of touch I am and how that she works in the real world.
Oh, sorry, Parvati, I interrupted you.
Oh,
but-
no, I was saying you're not dumb, Larry.
I have some smarts.
If you know everything, then you will be called encyclopedia, not Larry.
Okay.
So yeah,
I'm sorry, I'd be called what?
encyclopedia.
Oh, in the encyclopedia. ENCYC. All right. Did we have this? Oh, you know what? It's kind of a duplicate side, but it's the first time we see the disassembler. So again, this is when you pull the malware down because it's encrypted. You can't look for a signature. So you decrypt it, you run it. It's basically, and then the first thing it's going to try to do is phone home, and then you decide, what it does. But what's kind of funny is I know a lot of malware guys, well, just who do this, and they said, dude, but you understand that they understand we're doing that. So it's become such a cat and mouse that malware actually will have am I in a sandbox? Because if I am, don't do my evil deed so they can't figure out what I'm doing. And I'm like, well, what do you do there? Because they do all kinds of things. They'll just try to do an NS lookup. They'll try to ping Google, whatever, all these different ways they try to determine whether or not they're in a sandbox before they even reveal their hand, We talked about this, and it's where did I just see it again? There's a big some big article in the news yesterday, the quantum safe cryptography, and they're acting like we're trying to get it. We're trying to figure this out, scientists. NIST figured it out. This just selected them a couple of years ago now. Oh, where's my? These are, but I am going to find out the new name for it because it was called Crystals Dilithium, a Star Trek name, and somehow they changed it. Post quantum computing NIST. And where's your selection? Selected algorithms, 2022. And Crystal's Kyber is the key management. We know that asymmetric encryption, these are identity keys. The only things that we think are affected by quantum computing, should it ever work, I'm not holding my breath. I think it's a lot of sales hype. But if it does break, it's only going to affect the asymmetric algorithms. For us, that's Diffie-Hellman to a small degree. To a much larger degree, RSA, an elliptical curve. Elliptical curve is what's used in Bitcoin. So we use our asymmetric algorithms to identify an identity. They're your ID keys. That's what you create for, when Ben's question, you created a key pair and you gave it to an identity provider and they've signed your certificate. And you're going to use it for key agreement and you're going to use it for signing. You're going to use it to encrypt the data encryption key. That's Crystal's Kyber. This is the key agreement protocol. The signing protocol, they actually picked a couple. Crystal Dilithium is no longer the name. That's what I want to find out. They also allowed you to do two others. We're not going to worry about, but it's 2022. They already selected. People act like the government, what we're trying to get it is in our tools. And Microsoft announced that they're going to do, I keep sniffing Edge to see if they're putting it in there yet, but new name. But the dilithium, a variant of, oh, come on. MLA, there we go. I guess it is kind of long. ML, digital signature. So what does ML stand for? Oh, look, and it's right at the ISC2. But what does ML stand for? And that's why we have AI. And then I'll go back to my slides. Oh, Claude. All right, we'll start it. Oh, I didn't tell you to start at that chart, chat. What does ML stand for in machine learning? I thought that's too easy. How does it machine learn? It doesn't machine learn anything. All right, whatever, fancy. Yeah, but everybody buys stuff with ML in it. You got to put AI or that's just they're selling right now. Whatever. All right. So those are the quantum safe algorithms. They're the ones that are going to be probably forced upon us by regulatory bodies, even though I doubt very much. In fact, on your own, if you want to know more, besides Kurzweil, who says he has no faith in it, my other favorite person, actually, she's a great YouTuber. My wife and I often enjoy some Sabine Hassenfelder. Sabine Hassenfelder. The quantum bubble is about to burst. Don't fall for the quantum hype. She's a physicist and she's so funny. Just one day. She's and sometimes she'll like sucker you in. Oh, they announced that they have a new quantum breakthrough and this one really looks good. Let's take a look. And then she'll rip it apart. You're like, so at the end of it, so what does it do? It uses a regular classical processor to use quantum proposed algorithms, which means it's doing it much slower than it could do if it was just natural algorithms, and it doesn't produce anything useful yet. But other than that, it looks great. Oh, bullshit headlines everywhere. That being said, we need to know about it. It's actually been on the exam since 2005, the CISSP, to know about quantum threats to asymmetric algorithms. Oh, a blockchain. Let me show you. Now that we know how hashing is, this is what Bitcoin does. It's a proof of work algorithm. Actually, I didn't mean to draw a computer. It was supposed to be a block. History that can't be tampered with. Write your log, the captain's log on the ship or whatever, or a Bitcoin transaction. All the data in there. Create a hash of it. We get the SHA-2 hash. Some 256-bit hash. Hold up, guys. What? I don't like that hash. What do you mean? I want you to come up with a way. Let's look at a hash here. Oh, my algorithm. I don't have my favorite tool, but I'll show you what it does. The idea, I'm not going to go long. I want the hash to start with a 0. Huh? Yeah, you got to come up with something where the first, whatever, transaction 1. And I calculate a hash. It happened to do it. What well, that wasn't supposed to happen. So if I were going to salt this, the salt to make it equal to 0, let me do it another way. That's not really, you have to salt it with something that makes it come out to a 0. Do it again. So that didn't work. So you keep trying it again. You're like, you're going to guess a salt. That's when you add something that would ensure a leading, and there's some number of zeros. It actually wasn't, it never rolled out with, just guess the first one. It had to be that you got to get 8 zeros in a row. It's still pretty hard, a leading number of zeros. With every number that you add. Now it's got to be 9. Well, that makes it more difficult. When you hear about Bitcoin difficulty, they're saying that now you got to get up to whatever 8 zeros. Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at the current blocks. Current Bitcoin block. Where's our hash? See the hashes? They all start with zeros. The more zeros you get, and you used to be able to do that when you're on your little computer, but now you need like large data centers, and every time they're really large. That's why they generate so much energy. But when you guess it, there's millions of people. Right now, there's about 1 million miners out there trying to guess what that number would be. And when they get it, they go, I got it. And they share it with the other miners. And they're like, oh, yeah, I'll be the one to judge. And if as long as 51% of them all get zeros, it's considered safe. I could corrupt that with a cat video. Bitcoin blocks are recalculated every 10 minutes. I would have to get everybody to, I'd have to get not just one person to click, I'd have to get 51% of the 1 million miners to click on my cat video within 10 minutes. What's the likelihood of that ever happening? China had 97% of Bitcoin, 77% of all Bitcoin miners in China. And in 2021, Xi Jinping didn't like it. And rather than take advantage of the fact that he could have hacked Bitcoin and destroyed it, he kicked the miners out. That was probably the last chance any government had to hijack Bitcoin. So now, as my mother pointed out, history is only good till the winner of the last war, and then he rewrites it. Now you're going to have history that they can't rewrite. It's not just right. Bitcoin is an implementation of blockchain, a proof of work blockchain that I just prove to me you got the number that comes out to 0. Okay, it looks like you did. And it can write all kinds of trusted logs. It just happens to be used for finance in Bitcoin, but it could be used for all kinds of things. Anytime you need a trusted log, it's slow. There are other things we can do. There is proof of stake, and I can't get my head around them. Neither can anybody else. But it is awesome. It's going to change things significantly. I really think that AI and blockchain go together, because what we don't want is people rewriting the rules with AI. But if AI can read consistent rules and trust history, that's going to help a lot. And as my mom pointed out, if you don't learn from history, you're going to be forced to repeat it. So we don't want to make this, we don't want to hit that same cliff. We did it. A lot of stuff. Vulnerability and patch management, some of the most important things in operations, just maintaining that. Threat detection, they could be new. We talked about threat intelligence and having threat sources that you monitor. Log analysis and just figuring out, hey, this log on that. And that's what our SIM tools really do. Forensics. Remember the difference between incident response, which is like immediate, I got to take care of this incident. And a lot of times this happens when, like, you think a data breach, somebody clicked on something and you think GDPR, you got 72 hours and 72 hours later, we got to report it. We think our data might've been breached. 2 weeks later, the forensics analysts go, no, they never got it. It's hard. Forensics takes a lot longer. Implementing and reviewing our standard operating procedures, making sure that they're still appropriate through the changes, measuring performance effectiveness with KPIs and KRIs. And we talked about our advanced stuff with like SOAR and XDR. Some people use them interchangeably. Don't get in an argument with anybody. Our XDR module has all of that. I will say consistently, if I argue with my AIs, SOAR, you can assume, understands regulatory compliance. XDR, not necessarily. That's all I can. And they both can do user and entity behavior analytics and some emerging tech. Thank you, guys. You want to do some practice tests?
I need to drop off. Is
You
that
need
right?
to jump off? Well,
Yeah.
you have been awesome. It's so, again, I told my wife, I said, I wasn't sure if she liked me, because my wife always picks on me. I wouldn't like your class. I'd be picking on you all the time if you said that to me. And I said, I thought I had you in class. And I said, but she came back for this one. So apparently.
Thank you
Very-
very much, sharing your knowledge, and thank you, Arpita.
Thank you, Parvati.
I will bother you if I have any doubt.
Sure. I have a couple things to share with the group. I promise to be done in 3
I'm gonna
minutes. Larry,
pause
give
the
me-
recording. Let me pause the, should I record this?
No, just give me screen sharing rights, please.
You got it.